Hello and welcome back to another watercolor tutorial. So today we're going to be doing this cherry blossom branch. It looks like it might be kind of complicated, but it's really super easy. There's not anything that we're going to draw in beforehand because we're going to plan out our branch according to how our pink ends up being arranged, because we're going to be splattering it. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure my colors are wet. I'm using just the Winsor Newton Cotman set. For this being just a student set, it's got a really nice pigment load. It's got the colors that I need. The only change I've made to this is I took out the China white and put in a magenta, because to me I feel that that's a core color for mixing. And then if I'm going to use a white or something like that, I would use the P.H. Martin's bleed proof white, or if it's something tiny I can use a white gel pen. I won't need to do that today, but if you're looking for what are the basic supplies that I need. So I'm going to be starting off, I'm going to be laying in just a little foundation. I'm going to pick the yellow ochre here. You could do other colors. I like that kind of soft background it gives to that magenta and the dark brown. So I'll kind of need a decent amount of this. And so I'm going to kind of come in and wet the whole paper. And you can kind of do it in a cross hatch, so you get a little bit of texture into your, you could fill the whole thing in. You can see I've got a little bit of a clear border on this, but it's irregular. I think one of the things too on this layer, we kind of want to wet the paper during this process, but we don't want it super wet, because we're going to keep adding color to this. And by the time we get to the branch, we want that paper to be dry enough that we can work on it. Okay, so I can kind of use up what I've got here because I won't need that color again. Okay. I'm just going to take a clean brush and just kind of soften those edges a little bit. All right. I'll wipe this off because I don't need that color anymore. So my next thing I'm going to be doing, I'm using just a medium round brush here. I'm going to be coming in with my magenta. So you can see that's with the water in there, it's activated up really nicely. I've got a nice inky color. So the first thing I'm going to start off with, while it's nice and soupy like this, is I'm going to come in and start tapping in some of my color here. Okay, so I can keep this part here kind of open since my branch, that thicker part of the branch, is here. So you can see just with how much water I have in there that magenta is really dispersing quite a bit. Okay, so we're going to be building this up into layers, and I'm going to need this to dry a little bit. Actually, I might take about 10 seconds and even hit this with the hairdryer, because I can see in the light how wet this is. I'm going to take just to kind of speed that up a little bit. If my paper is looking kind of a little more wet but matte, that should be fine. But I could tell I had lots of glossy spots. So, if I wasn't doing the video, I could work on 2 of these and let one dry while the other one I'm working on it. That's always an easy way to do. You'll You always learn something every time you paint, so doing something more than once is always a good idea, because you'll come back and do things or try things differently. This is kind of designed for daily practice. So as you can see, I'm coming in, the paper's not as wet, so it's not going to disperse out quite as much. And these colors are going to stay a little stronger, stay put. And so I need to get kind of my main parts of this established in, because that is what's going to dictate my branches. Okay. So like this part here, I can see that my paper's still a little more wet. Over here it's drier, so you can see those splatters are staying in place. And that's where you have to kind of look at your paper and gauge what's going on so you know how to proceed. So this area here, I'm going to stay away from it a little bit. So I'll probably start my branch and maybe come up this way and then this way and save this for last, just to give that a little more time to dry. So what the key parts to think on this, or think about when you're planning it out, is when you're building that branch across, we want to come up to areas where we have these clusters, stop our branch, and then build it back on it. I think the mistake that people make on this is they want to build the branch right over top of it. And this has so much more dimension when we're allowing for some of those flowers to come in front of the branch. Okay, so that's going to be the key. You're going to do some branch, stop, and then, but you want there to be a fluidity in how that branch moves. The other thing is, don't make your branches straight. The more curve you have, it's going to look more natural. So give them some kind of that gnarly turning in them to make it seem more natural. All right, so I don't think this got any water on it when I was doing it. So I'm going to be using the burnt umber here, and I'm going to start laying in my branch with that. So if I kind of come up this way, up kind of towards this cluster, okay, and if I paint over some of them, that's okay, but just remember when I get up to that main part. So I'm just kind of laying in the foundation of it right now. Okay, and I kind of do the same thing here. Maybe in this section that is going to split off, and it can even come and split off again. The other thing you want to be mindful is that wherever your area is, that you have that the branch is always diminishing, that it's getting smaller as it's coming across. So I'm going to come down here to this area, and then I'll stop here. I've got this nice big blob, that'll be a nice cluster there, and then see how I can reach up and come up to this one. Okay, stop it, and then I can have it come up here and even branch off here. I think I want to have like a little one come up to here. You know, if you make your branches kind of on the thin side, you can always come in and thicken them up a little bit, just so you feel like everything has a nice flow to it. Here we're going to bring one, kind of paint around these here, so let's see, those are on front. I'm going to bring the branch branch over towards here. And then these little tufts, you know, like they'll have little branches that come over to them too. Not every little flower has to necessarily kind of be connected. And then some of this I can add more detail in on top so it all makes sense. Okay, so we'll bring some up in there. So we'll want to add more into here. So here we're going to add a little bit of the stem popping through. And we'll have some coming here. And I can always still add in some little tidbits as I kind of see, you know, what's called for. This will be enough to get me started here. Okay, so we've left those spaces. I think this needs to come up right up in there. So I've got that fluid motion coming from that branch. So this part here is going to be dry enough to come back over again. And so as I'm kind of doing the second layer now, I'm going to be more tapping it in, leaving some space, some open space below, so I can build in some texture to this. And meanwhile, we're letting that other pink part kind of dry. Bring up in there. And this part's going to go pretty quick because we're not doing all that planning and figuring out what goes where. So you can see by adding the second layer how it also is going to bring more intensity to our branch. I'm going to bring a little bit of, when I get this layer in, we'll bring a little bit of black and kind of bring a little more of a shadow side to that, which will also bring help with a little bit of the dimension and shape. Okay. Texture. So the part here, I would say, you know, what's that thing that's easy to do? Is to come back and feel like you're painting, you know, this every little line again. And this layer here is really more about starting to develop texture. Okay, so you can see right here. Pick up a little black. Bring, oh, that's good. Probably plenty right there. A bit more of the burnt umber. I don't want it to go black. I just want a nice deep brown. Okay. Again, I'm just going to keep that kind of more on the bottom side, on the shadowy side. Keep that very delicate, not to go too heavy-handed here. Okay, on the bottom side. So like this part in here might be a little more shady since it's coming in underneath. Plus, maybe a little deeper right there. this one. Okay. All right. We're almost there. Okay, so you can see how that kind of starts to come together. Just kind of looking, everything has a kind of at least a balance to it, that it all looks like it belongs together. All right, so I'm going to be coming back into the pink again. And so I am going to be, now that that paper is good and should be fairly dry, I'll bring up a little more of the magenta, and I'm going to go ahead and splatter some of this. We'll come in and we'll put some little dots to it, but I think the splattering, because it's not as controlled, just makes for a nicer effect. It's easy to get a little too polka dotty when you're doing some of the texture in by hand. Obviously I'm not going to get it everywhere that I need, but this is going to bring a nice organic and remember, if you are having a hard time getting this to come off, you can use another brush. Adding to it like that. So I'm going to come in, I am going to dab a little bit by hand, and I'm going to bring in some crimson in with that magenta just to give me a different tone. Kind of clean that off a little bit. Okay, so here I can do that crimson with the magenta. A little different tone so it kind of stands out from some of the other. And so here's where some of these branches that don't have much, you just kind of tap in. Now this is still wet, so I'm going to have to watch where I put my hand if I'm not going to wait for it to dry, just so I'm not smearing all of that. That is easy to do. So see, is just where I'm layering in some with this magenta and crimson mixture. Kind of keep the shapes random so they don't look too controlled. I'm just holding my brush straight up and down and just kind of giving a little bounce to it. These are really fun because you don't have to overthink them too much. Just kind of get in the zone and play and say, ooh, I'll add a little bit here. Okay, so these here we want to bring a little bit into that. I can add a little bit in, like even here. There's a little bit of a gap or something. This would make a really pretty birthday or Mother's Day card. Got Mother's Day coming up here in a few days. Going to keep addressing the areas that, you know, don't have as much, so I get a nice balance between everything, that it looks like it all belongs. I might need to pick up a little bit to kind of keep my color intense. You know, I don't want to fill everything in. I want some of that to be able to come through underneath. But for me, like if I looking for something, I want to, you know, kind of relax, just kind of spend some time to, you know, regroup. And like, this is the kind of thing that always comes through. And I'll do these in like a little set of 4 or something for like a little note card set. Come back and go ahead and I'll use a little bit more of this. Some of these that are kind of off on their own, it kind of reminds you of like maybe they're blowing in the wind and they've, you know, they've come off from the branch or the cluster there. All right, so you let that dry, and that is a super easy, fun cherry blossom branch. And I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. If you be sure to like it and subscribe. If you know anyone that might be interested in doing a class like this, I would appreciate it if you could share it with them. And then we'll see you next time. Thanks again.